Next thing let's talk about is operations management, and this is making sure that down at the lower level, the operations of that business unit, that department, are running smoothly. I remember one time I had to take a look at why are we not getting the data that we need to, and it really came down to the operations management at the health facilities themselves. They were so busy providing their clinical duties that they couldn't provide their data entry duties. And so we found this to be a widespread problem. But we had to actually go down and see the operational management. The people, the superintendents who were in charge of the facilities, their whole focus was on taking care of patients, not providing the data that the folks above them needed so that they could track disease in that country. So when you're talking about operations management, you're talking about allocating resources, and you almost always never have enough resources. You're always shorthanded. Managing the resources wisely to produce what you need to produce, all the while enforcing standards, and just making sure that the processes themselves are running properly. You always need to focus more on process than actually individual people. Because individual people can come and go, they can be replaced, they can be reassigned. It's the process that needs to be in place. And that was one thing that we had to spend a lot of time on. Can we establish a process and have enough people know the process and have enough documentation and have that just be part of the daily culture of those particular clinics, so that if new people came in, they just kind of folded into the process. That's really becomes much more important than one particular person. Another thing I had to audit one time was, why is this particular department of developers so variable in their output? And what it really came down to was there was one developer who was really, really strong, but there wasn't a process for distributing the load and increasing the skill set of the other developers. And unfortunately, the manager at the time focused so much on that one developer that everybody else just kind of sat around and languished, and it wasn't good utilization of the staff. It wasn't a good process, because if that one guy goes or leaves or whatever, then they were dead. So you really need to be focusing on process more than just specific individuals when you want to make sure that operations can be sustainable. One thing that departments will often do in IT is lights out operation. You probably do it yourself in a small way. Lights out simply means I'm going to let something run unattended, and maybe I will lock the computer, maybe I'll lock the computer room, I'll even shut down the lights, or just lock it up, there's nobody there. It's a two-edged sword to do lights out. The good thing about lights out is that stuff just runs, but you had to have set it up properly. You have had to accounted for, okay, the jobs are scheduled in a certain way, they can proceed if there's an error, the reporting is automatic. And the nice part about it is that you can then have personnel focus on something else. And this is really good for automated batch jobs. We've brought in all of these transactions, now we're going to process them tonight, put them in the database tonight. Or it could be something like system maintenance. We're going to have automated backups and disk cleanup and defrag the database and defrag the disk, etc. The downside is if you don't have it set up properly, then the whole thing could halt on some kind of failure, or maybe it's not generating reports, so in the morning you think everything's good and the backup actually didn't succeed and nobody bothers to check. Also, the fact that you don't have people there, or you're not attending it, you're not watching it, the upside is that maybe you won't be introducing human error of people coming in and doing stuff, or even malicious intent. The downside is there's no one there to watch, and just wondering if they're suspicious individuals. So if you do lights out, and you probably will, just make sure that you check in the morning, okay, did everything get done? And that you have enough configuration and enough sort of monitoring and security to make sure that nobody sneaked in while your back was turned. But the IS auditor is going to want to be checking on all of this. Was the lights out effective, and were people checking the next day to make sure that last night's tasks were finished properly? Let's also talk about data entry controls. Remember, control is anything from a policy, a procedure, a technical control, software, a process, anything that helps to minimize, mitigate risk, and to keep process running the way it should. So some data entry controls can include, well, wait, let me authorize all those things before you just start inputting it. Let me just make sure that these things should be inputted, these transactions. Maybe you've got a whole bunch of documents, people have been filling stuff in, and before we process this, before we input it, let me take a look. Another thing would be, okay, we've inputted a whole bunch of stuff. Let me just kind of compare input and outputs, and let me reconcile differences. I was taking a look one time at why reports weren't coming out the way we thought they should. And what I had to do was actually look at, okay, what were people inputting? And I had to actually look at the paper, because in those rural areas, people were collecting data on paper first. They were collecting patient information and doctor's orders and prescriptions and procedures and all this stuff on paper. And then later, a truck would come around, basically with a mobile computer lab, and people would take all these batches and input them into the system. And so we weren't getting the kinds of reports that we expected to see. So I had to actually look at the paper and reconcile it with the reports that were coming out. As it turned out, there was nothing wrong with the data entry. The problem was that the actual way the reports ran, the structure of how it managed the data, the reports didn't output the data the way people expected it to. The reports actually did what they were designed to do, but the people didn't understand how to interpret what they saw. So they thought they saw something here, but the intent of that was really this. And so it took a while to figure out why, when I was trying to reconcile inputs and outputs, why it wasn't suiting the business need. It turned out to actually be not an input problem at all, not a report problem at all, but just the way people assumed when they saw the fields in the report, they assumed that it meant this when it actually meant that. Another thing you can do is you can just divide the duties among staffers, and dividing the duties for the control simply means that if you input, then you reconcile. Or if you back up, then you restore. It's not just to divide workload, but also to make sure that the same error can't be made on both ends. You know, it's just like if you write something, don't proofread your own writing. Have someone else look at it. And this will cut down on errors, not only honest errors, but also maybe someone trying to hide something as well. Plus, also, if you have a different person, they may notice things that somebody else may not notice, and that the inputter may not notice. Another thing you have to worry about is how files are handled, and not just paper files, but also those flash drives, removable media, tape backups, databases, database files. Are they being taken off-site for storage? Are they being carried around in someone's pocket? I mean, I know that sounds funny, but when you're in a place where you don't have lots of telecommunication infrastructure, people carry around flash drives, and they carry computer viruses with them, and they spread that infection everywhere. So, and also, where are the backups? Are the backups just sitting right there? I mean, we've had cases of theft where people just walked right in, and they stole laptops off of desks, even when people were in the office. And had they known what they were actually doing, they could have gone into the server room and stolen data out of there. But they were just, of course, interested in selling laptops. They didn't realize how valuable the data was. So the IS auditor needs to be looking at how are people handling the storage and the transport and the off-site storage of any kind of data on any kind of media. When we talk about operations management best practices, we are really interested in how well is IT serving its customers. It really drives me crazy, this is a personal pet peeve of mine, to go into an IT department and the IT people are just kind of arrogant over the customers that they're serving. And when I say customers, I mean the users. Yeah, we all have jokes about how users have broken this or users don't know that, but really, it's the users, their job is the job to be productive and bring in the income and do all the things that the business needs to do. IT's job should be very customer service oriented so that users can do their job to the best of their ability and make the money that pays for IT. I mean, true, IT is now a big business supporter, not just simply a cost center. But the IT staff needs to understand that, and I compliment people when I see that a department really has a customer service bent. I know it's easy to lose patience with users, but they're the ones who are actually doing the business, and we're there to support them so they can do their job. And so making sure that in operations management that IT is a customer service department, making sure that we respond quickly and effectively, and that we follow up and make sure that everybody can be productive and that their need is responded to immediately so they're not sitting dead and unproductive. And also making sure that, of course, our operational environment itself is running smoothly and is stable. So when we are evaluating operations management as an IS auditor, we'll be looking at the following things. We want to make sure, of course, that there are schedules for each shift, that we're effectively using resources and we're justifying efficient and effective use of resources, and our justification is sound. Why are you doing it that way? Okay, I see why. We want to make sure that IT monitoring is in line with policy. If we have to be very security conscious or very accuracy conscious or whatever, we want to make sure the monitoring is in line with that. We want to make sure that vulnerabilities are identified and dealt with very quickly, and we want to be looking at logs to make sure changes are authorized, and if there are any authorized changes, that they're made promptly to whatever, the system, the network, the schedule. Make sure that we're in compliance with standards, that there's accountability of operations, and so don't be letting people all log on as admin or share the same account. You know, one of the things that we really had to hammer into people's heads was you need to log on as your account, not as somebody else's account, because we need to see who is doing something. Likewise, don't share your password with someone else, because if they make mistakes or they do something deliberate, you'll be the one who get in trouble for it, and you'll be responsible for it. We want to make sure that there's accountability, the users and the IT department, that physical and logical access to resources is limited only to authorized users. So not everybody can get in to see this, not everybody can view reports, especially with something as critical and as private as patient data. It's okay for a district officer to see general statistics. It's not okay for a district officer to see that particular user is on that particular HIV drug regimen. And also to verify that the computing environment itself is maintained, and that if there are any errors, any problems with the processing system, that we can recover in a quick and timely manner and not lose any data.